Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about The Five Bloods, which is the new film from Spike Lee, and it's on Netflix. Made for Netflix, and it was going to have at least a release at Cannes, but obviously COVID stopped that. It's just Netflix. I had a really, really good time. I think it's a really good film. What about you?
I didn't like it.
Oh, really? Oh, very interesting. Well, let's quickly say what it's about before we get into that, because I really thought you'd like it, I must say. It's about...
I love Spike Lee.
Yeah.
I love Spike Lee, and I think he is an underrated American director with a very unique voice and style. But actually, this film contains all of those elements that I like least about his work.
Okay.
So we can discuss that. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's say what it's about before we get into that. Because, like I say, I really thought you'd like it, but we'll see. It's about four aging African-American former soldiers in Vietnam. And in the present day, they return to Vietnam. The official reason they're there, and one of the actual reasons that they're there, is to search for the body of a fallen comrade, Norm. Stormin Norman, they call him, or Stormin Norm. He was their leader, and he's become a massive figure in their heads and a kind of spiritual leader almost. Like, they constantly refer to what he told them to do and the way he encouraged them to live their lives and things. They go back to search for his body, which was never recovered. But secretly, they're also looking for hidden gold. They were there was this box full of gold bars that were supposed to be paying South Vietnamese from the American government. And it was in the tail of a plane. It crashed. They couldn't recover it, and they just said, we're going to hide this. We're going to keep this for ourselves. Stormin Norman was saying, give it to our cause. Give it to black people, basically. Build up black America with this. They go back years later to find where they'd hidden it. And of course, because this is what always happens in things like tontines, they go back, and once they find it, the arguments start, the paranoia and tensions kind of start to grow. And there's one central character, one of the Bloods, is a Trump guy, a Trump supporter. And he's an interesting one to me because he starts off as, it's very obvious that that's a point of interest. You see his Trump hat, he's talking about building the wall, and his friends are saying, what, really? You? Mm-hmm. And what I think is very good about the way his character is developed is that him being a Trump supporter is a symptom, not a cause. You know, him being a Trump supporter isn't the start of why he is angry or depressed or anything like that. It's obvious that his being a Trump supporter comes from something deeper lying that you kind of start to dig into. So why don't you... I'm interested to say, what didn't you like?
I didn't like the preachiness. I didn't like that it's a history lesson. I mean, I recognize, that America at this time might benefit from a history lesson. And, from a really passionately delivered point of view or argument on race in America, and particularly in relation to the Vietnam War. But it's just not my idea of a good movie. I thought, the characters weren't very well worked out. The relationships weren't very well worked out. I mean, to me, it is one of those, when Sam Goldwyn said, well, if I wanted to send a message, I'd send Western Union. I don't quite believe that. Because I think, films are very capable of getting people passionately involved with ideas. But this just felt too classroom to me. And I didn't like the direction of the actors. I thought the actors who were good actors came through. I thought, some of those roles really required a star. So I know that Delroy Lindo has been praised for his performance in this film, but I would have liked to have seen someone like Wesley Snipes or Denzel Washington, in the role. And I thought a lot of the minor performances seemed really amateurish, and I include the French woman in this, and the son, so they were so it felt like a dramatization of a series of ideas, but I never felt that any of the characters were real. The film deals with ambiguities of ideas or contradictions, in ideas. So you're always made aware that the black experience in Vietnam also has to be kind of counterpointed, to what happened to the Vietnamese themselves. Yeah, so I think the film is very good and very sensitive about taking all of these elements into account. Yeah, but it's taking them into account as if it were an essay rather than as if it were a drama. Yeah, and I found it hard-going myself. Yeah,
I know what you mean to some extent. Although it didn't come across to me as essay-like. I kind of appreciated what when characters actually do literally give history lessons. Particularly Stormin Norman, he talks about black heroes of the past and black martyrs and so on. And I like the idea that those characters were informed, because I think it says something about their characters as well. It's not just for the audience, although it clearly is for the audience. But it kind of says what's going on in this movie and what we're doing has history behind it. And there is a history of black people fighting their masters. There's a whole thing about Vietnamese radio broadcasts directly appealing to black American troops, saying you're taken for granted. You're 8% of the American population, but you're 30% of the soldiers here. That sort of thing. And yet, and despite that, that's all kind of true, and that is, I think, probably part of what you're referring to as the history lesson. These are facts being imparted. It's also important that the way they're being imparted to these characters at the time, and then the decisions that they make with those in mind. They kind of listen to her, or they hear what she's saying, but they don't mutiny. And there's a complexity going on within them, that they are completely aware of how black people are taken advantage of by their country and used and so on, and the history of that. But they are very proud to have fought and sacrificed for it too.
Yes.
Yes,
I mean, it ends with that Langston Hughes poem saying something like, America isn't mine, but it will be. He, and speaking for black people in general, will not always be excluded. And kind of there are elements like that I found kind of moving. But I really do feel that it is like a kind of a not smooth, a creaky essay film. You can see, you can almost feel the screenwriters, of which Spike Lee is one, putting in, okay, well, we've got to fit in this argument here, and then kind of that argument there, and we've got to take into account, the French war in Vietnam that preceded us, and, and you saw things coming a mile away. I mean, as soon as in the bar, when the son and the French woman talk and says, well, what do you do? And, kind of we clear landmines. You just know that, the landmine is going to pop up at some point. So I just kind of felt it was creaky, and by the numbers and preachy. And actually, I often feel this about Spike Lee in his worst work, because I do think he's a great filmmaker. But in his worst work, he gives you the impression that he's got all the answers. Yeah, and I think, this is something about this film as well. Yeah, even the complexities are by the numbers, and to me, not emotionally believable. So, the relationship between the father and the son, and I think, it's kind of, these things in films are one of my weaknesses, but I had a double reaction to it, in the sense that, there were moments that I found it very moving, and there were moments that I just didn't believe it. It kind of, I don't think that's the way, humans, with all their complexity, respond to things, really, It didn't feel like a real relationship to me. It felt like a kind of a relationship that was there to make an argument. Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that I really did like about the film was in the Vietnam flashback scenes. The 4 surviving older bloods are themselves. They're not portrayed by younger actors, neither are they de-aged like the Irishman. They are themselves, as old men, fighting alongside young Stormin Norman, who's played by Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther. And I thought that was such a great decision, because it does a couple of things. It brings up that idea of how the war never leaves you, right? It's particularly a trope in Vietnam, and I don't just mean Vietnam movies, but just kind of the kind of cultural hangover of Vietnam. These people did not kind of mentally survive this, and it lives with them the whole time, and it totally feels like that. And I think the way that those scenes are cut into very often, they'll be walking through the jungle, and they just walk into a war scene. It's alive and it's right there, and they are just back in a firefight with the Viet Cong. And it also really smoothly kind of communicates the idea of how alive Stormin Norman is to them, and how he never got old. He never had the chance to get old. He doesn't look like them anymore. You know, he's constantly going to be, 28 years old or whatever he is. And this kind of, this perfect young man with his philosophies and his ideas and his leadership, it's still, he's their son now. He looks like their son. In fact, the one guy's son is there, and he's the same age. But the one guy is their leader, and the other guy is subservient, and he's not even supposed to be there.
I was thinking, one of the lacks in American cinema seems to be, at the moment, almost like a failure of imagination, right? Kind of American cinema for so long, so admired. And the characters in the film refer jokingly to the Rambo films, all about kind of attempts to re-win the Vietnam War. And I was thinking, well, here's a film that can't imagine a trip back to Vietnam to deal with all the issues that the film deals without having a gold heist in the middle of it, right? So some of the things that the film criticizes about, Trumpian America or Trumpist America, it is itself kind of guilty of. I mean, can't you just imagine a film in which these four friends go to recover the remains of his friend and have, all the similar conversations or all the similar emotional problems or, the same problems with their son without having to get into, stealing gold?
Wouldn't you have found that even more preachy? Because these guys would have been ideologically pure,
No, not necessarily. I mean, obviously, it depends on how you write the characters and so on, right? But the thing is, it seems that you can't, or the idea of making a drama about human relationships, social guilt, race relations in America, the past, and all of that somehow can't be imagined without putting a heist for gold in the middle of it, which is, very dodgy. So all the emotional complexities that are not in the film are actually left unanswered by this pursuit of gold, right? Like, what right do they have to it, right? There are kind of competing rights. I mean, even the moments where, they don't even get too greedy about it. Like, you'd think that in some of these films, like The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, they'd start killing each other off for the gold, but no. So that whole subplot just seemed, to me, a failure of imagination. What they're accusing the Rambo films of.
I didn't like how the Trump supporting character, how he left his gold, and how his story develops. I think he starts off as an interesting character because, like I say, there's this one hook, which is he wears this tatty MAGA hat, and he's talking about building the wall and so on. And you're going, okay, right, where does this guy come from? What's happened to him? And because obviously all his mates don't agree with him too. And I think you start to get into that. And then when he goes off on his own, he's you might say he's the kind of central source of much of the tension as the film as the relationships degrade, and he's the one who kind of takes control of the one gun that they have, and he starts threatening people. And he says, you guys do what you want with your share of the gold, I'm going off on my own. And he does. And he has these couple of long takes where he's stalking through the forest towards the camera, talking to the camera. And then what happens to him is he loses his bag. It gets up on a tree and he can't get it anymore. And he leaves it very easily, and he kind of says, well, that's for Norm then. Which I kind of didn't buy, right? I didn't buy that he would just let it go so easily. He would hack the fucking tree down or something. Like, nothing had really changed about him at that point. And then he has this vision of Norm, which he's been referring to all the time. He keeps on talking that Norm comes to him in his sleep and talks to him in his sleep, and he talks back. And he sees Norm, and in this vision, he remembers and kind of admits to himself, essentially, that he's the one who killed Norm by accident. He heard commotion behind him, he turned around and sprayed bullets, and Norm got hit. And this is something that he's never been able to forgive himself for, and you understand at this point, like, this is obviously such a deep source of his tension and everything that has changed in his personality over the years. And from that moment on, I kind of, I wanted him to have the chance at redemption, of kind of honesty and so on and so forth. And what happens is he immediately dies. He doesn't get that chance. But I didn't like how that vision came up. I thought nothing motivated it. It wasn't anything from the outside. It wasn't a secret that came out when other people were around. Nothing about him being on his own had justified it. He'd been on his own for 30 years, and this hadn't happened. And it clearly wasn't anything that happened in the jungle that had made this. He was just kind of going crazier and crazier. But nothing motivated him being honest with himself at this particular point. Do you know what I mean? That was a very clunky. That's like a tropey moment that was just, it felt sellotaped on.
Yes. Well, I think much of the film feels that way to me, actually. And I suppose this is what I mean, that, the film has various arguments and various history lessons, and then the drama is stitched in kind of to permit that to be conveyed. And I think in a way, I mean, who am I to judge in a way? Maybe this is what America needs. And, kind of certainly the film was greatly welcomed, and it feels that those history lessons in the film are perhaps much needed, but to me they made the film feel really clunky, and also kind of smug. I don't like it. I think it's kind of talking at me.
I do know what you mean there. I do. Did you remember the history lesson kind of segment, if you like, in Black Klansman with Harry Belafonte talking about lynchings and so on, and it's intercut with the KKK having their meeting or watching a movie, I think they were, because that was very much of that similar, this is a history lesson being delivered to you. But I don't think either of us had a problem with that then, and it seemed to really fit. The tone was slightly different as well there. The tone was solemn and somber, because the idea was this guy, Harry Belafonte, was playing a guy who had actually been there, and was talking about his own past, as opposed to a kind of more abstract history lesson about people from a couple of 100 years ago, which is what happens in this film more so. But I suppose I don't completely object. I never really completely object to Spike Lee's sort of form of propaganda, if you like. I think some people really need, some filmmakers really work in kind of propaganda modes, and sometimes we really need to hear it, And it's like it's so clear what the point of view is and what he wants you to understand from it. But in this case, it obviously comes at the cost of clunkiness.
Yes, I mean, I wish he would stop being less of a propagandist and more of an artist, right? Because, one of the things in the film is, I think all of the music is Marvin Gaye.
Almost all of it, yeah.
And I think those songs convey so much more about the struggle and the pain and, and the beauty of, dealing with all those kinds of experiences than the film does, right?
Yeah, well, they're all from, I think there's 6 songs from Marvin Gaye, and they're all from What's Going On, which was released in the middle of the Vietnam War, about 71, I think. And I think actually the use of music, I think it's beautiful, and as you said, it's very evocative, and I also think it's great that Spike Lee has managed to make a Vietnam movie without Fortunate Son, which again is like such the Vietnam trope. Although he does use Ride of the Valkyries at one point in what I thought was a very funny scene where they're going downriver, and of course, rather than going downriver into hell, they're going into a lovely town that's full of people selling oranges and shit.
Yes. Though, all of those things, that scene where the person selling oranges and the scene with the man who was selling the chicken, I thought it was like so crude and insensitive and arrogant. It was like ugly Americanism in a way that you felt, that neither the actor nor the director were actually quite aware of the dynamics of those things. So obviously the scene is meant to illustrate, kind of a point. And the point being that, kind of the Vietnamese people are the people who suffered in the Vietnam War more than anyone. But, the racial relations between the Delroy Lindo character and the chicken seller, I thought were just abysmally crude and insensitive, and I couldn't understand how badly directed. It comes across terribly, I think. Yeah,
I agree. That was a scene which was very obviously It was there to communicate something. It was there to communicate, in particular, his stress and PTSD and attitude. But it was crude. Like, we already understood that this guy is xenophobic. That might be the nicest way to put it. I mean, is he racist to what? I suppose he calls them gooks, doesn't he, the Vietnamese? And this is the Trump supporting character. So this is the guy who kind of has all of this upset and turmoil inside him. But we already kind of know by this point. What did we learn from that scene that we didn't already know about him? Not very much, really.
Exactly. Well, I think also, just to continue with this idea for a while, one of the things that I couldn't understand is how the son of this very damaged, angry, bitter person could grow up to be, this nice, sensitive school teacher.
Yeah.
Right? So I think a better film, would just have alluded to, family relations or...
It does allude to it, but that's all it does. I think it's vaguely mentioned 2 or 3 times, the way I treated you when you were young. And I don't think it implies physical beating or anything like that. It really just implies, this guy was so messed up, he could not be a family man, and he failed in raising his son. But they don't go into anything like that. They don't go into what it was, really. It's just that it's this thing about his mother died in childbirth and his dad hated him for it his entire life and couldn't hide it. But they don't talk about it together. They don't go into any of that. And as you say, the guy is really well adjusted for someone who has had that sort of a childhood and that sort of a father.
And you could have done that with a line, did his grandmother bring him up? Did an aunt? Because... there is this connotation that the father was a really bad father, right? So who made up for it, right? There's kind of a question in that whole relationship that the characters, in a way, don't make sense, or they don't make sense to me anyway, right? There's a bit of information that you feel is lacking, right? So how did the son of this person who was so withdrawn in terms of love, and who admits to not having been a good father and having been, in fact, a disruptive one, how did he turn out so well? There must have been other people, right? So
for a film that's so interested in history, actually the most important history in the film is left out, which is his. We understand the history of the 4 Bloods who are still there. We don't really need to know anything about them before the draft. They were drafted, they fought together, and that's led to who they became now. That's just what their history is. But the young guy, you want to know more about him, and it's left assumed, I think, that you will just accept that this relationship is what it is. But no, I wanted more out of him. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that was true of all of the relationships for me in the film, and this is, I think, where my problem with the film is. So and I suppose, maybe the film is not addressed to me. Which is just a good thing. I think there is a clear sense that it's addressed at a Black American audience, right? All of these history lessons that are kind of being communicated are, the history of particular peoples in a particular place. So, and I am not, that person. So, maybe there are images and events and, that are very emotionally rousing to other people in a way that they're not to me. So, for example, that whole Black Lives Matter chanting at the end of the film, I thought, ugh, right? I support Black Lives Matter, et cetera, but it just felt like, I don't know, white liberal guilt or whatever is meant to make up, for the dramatic insufficiencies in the film, and I just wasn't buying.
Yeah, it does come across as quite a tenuous link, really. It's just kind of, it's a very general history of black struggle in America, and that's yeah. Although I like the way the film opens. The very opening is that footage of Muhammad Ali talking about,
oh, that's wonderful.
Why would I go to Vietnam and shoot these people? They never call me the N-word, and so on and so forth. These guys I have more in common with them than the people who oppress me. which is wonderful. It's, as you say, wonderful footage, wonderfully eloquent. The way he expresses it is just perfect, you know. And then it has, again, it's a history lesson, a very long montage with, you know, particularly iconic images that you remember of the guy being shot at point blank range and the napalm and so on and so forth, and lots of things about Vietnam, which I thought worked really well. And I think that very often is some of the most evocative stuff that Spike Lee does, even if it is preachy or kind of obvious. I think sometimes, as I say, that propaganda mode of very starkly showing you images one after the other, photographs, music, clips of footage. I think he does that really well, and I think he always evokes something very profound through it. Profound might be too much, but powerful.
Yes, well, I mean, you know, I'm clearly the exception. People have responded. You know, the film has this extraordinary rating, you know, in, what is it, Rotten Tomatoes or whatever. I am very suspicious, you know, so, I mean, you know, you can't just be a pure aesthete or something, as if, you know, films didn't come out in a particular time and place with particular kind of social problems and particular political dilemmas. I mean, you know, we're always imbricated in that, you know, but I couldn't help but think had the film come out, you know, at a different moment, it would have been received very differently, because I think as a film, it's really clunky.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you're doing a very good job of talking me out of it, to be honest, because I did have a good time, and I think I enjoyed the tone, and I enjoyed the look of it. And I did enjoy, you know, some of the relationships between the characters and some of the kind of banter and so forth. But I mean, you're doing a very good job of making me go, no, actually,
well, I don't want to...
No, you're right. I mean, I think what you're saying is true. And it's making me think twice about it, that actually this isn't very fulfilling. I think it's still entertaining. I had a really good time, and I found it very entertaining, and I found some of it very striking, but it's actually not all that nourishing.
Let's dwell on that for a moment. I mean, so kind of, you know, what were your pleasures in the film?
Well, I think it had a very strong command of tone. I've seen some people say they don't like how the tone shifts back and forth, and I quite enjoyed that. You know, it does have these darker moments, these lighter moments, and even jokes, that even kind of gory jokes. Like, I think when the one character is blown up by a landmine, that came across to me in part as a joke. The way it happened, it's a kind of it's a bit of a thud, a dull sort of explosion. And although it's a character that I think it's a character that you care least about, because he's the least interesting one and the least developed one. So that's why they can get rid of him so easily. You know, and they go across and they're upset to lose him. And, you know, the young guy's just seen a guy die. Oh my God. But, you know, it was a funny explosion, and it was a funny kind of, the bottom half of his body is all gory. And clearly it's, you know, the thing of you dig the guy into the ground and it's his head just going, ah! And I thought, that's funny. You know, maybe I wasn't supposed to. Maybe I'm a dick. But I thought that was funny. I thought, you know, Jean Reno is there just, like, it's almost like he's there purely to be Jean Reno, and it's funny just to see him again. And his...
Funny you should mention that, because I didn't recognize him until almost 2/3 of the way through the film.
Oh, right.
And my feeling was, you know, what a pity. They should have got Jean Reno instead of this fantastical actor. You know, I mean...
He does look different. He's got very much Gerard Depardieu kind of bulk to him now.
He looks very different. Not older, really. That's the thing. He must have had facelifts or whatever, because he doesn't look older, but he does look different. And actually, his whole energy is completely different. You know, and my initial impulse was, this is a Jean Reno role, and he would have brought so much more to it than this person, right? And then you realize, oh my God, I've made a mistake. It is Jean Reno. Yeah, but it's not the same Jean Reno we're used to.
No,
yeah?
It's not.
It's kind of
yeah. As I said, I like what I found striking about those propaganda moments, and I really liked, as I said, the way it goes into and out of Vietnam flashback, and the way that Stormin Norman is used and integrated with the rest of the team. I think it's a really, really clever, really brilliant decision, and obviously would have saved shitloads of time, because you don't have to de-age anyone, you don't have to get new actors in or anything like that. You just put the guy there, and it's so evocative to have this young guy amongst his older friends. It brings up so much, and it's so simple. I think that was a really, really smart decision. And I think the ending is fairly emotional too. I like how, I suppose, underneath everything there is this B-movie thing, as you say, it's the Rambo thing, the gold heist and so on. And I liked how that there's a cheapness to that story element that keeps everything moving that I kind of enjoyed. I think it's kind of knowing. and ultimately it has to end in a firefight. That's what these things do.
I suppose it's the cheapness that bothers me, and I think it's a cheapness of imagination, and also a certain kind of morality, actually. It's not, I think one shouldn't leave him out of those considerations, leave Spike Lee out of those considerations, because, if you think about the film, what is this about? Like, 5 men go, right, and then, what is it? One comes back. Is it one? Yeah.
One and the sons. One of the older ones and the son, isn't it?
Okay, one. Yeah. So one comes back, and then the money's supposed to make up for that. I mean, what kind of a shit capitalist film is this crap, right? Yeah.
The money and the guy discovers that he's got a daughter as well.
Yeah. Well, you could have discovered about the daughter and whatever. So basically, what you're, kind of somehow the money's meant to make up. For all these lives lost. And you think, what kind of a morality is that? Right? Like, kind of, the film is almost going against itself. Right? Kind of, how could you pay attention to all the other ethics involved in the film if the filmmaker can't even see that money cannot make up for those lives? And it doesn't matter if it goes to Black Lives Matter or, kind of anti-mine things. I mean, kind of... Yeah, so, I mean, this is a film that's meant to be about, kind of ethics and morality and rights and wrongs and stuff and so on. And then it just sells all of that stuff down the river like any cheap film does, right? It's kind of, about the gold.
Yeah.
And you're meant to forget it at the end, right? Like,
yeah, well, you're meant to relate it to the kind of wider Black American struggle. And it's a leap that... I think it's convincing in the moment because it jumps to this montage, but actually it doesn't stand up, really.
I mean, the ending is like, one of those billionaire philanthropists, right, that makes its money by exploiting people, murder, not paying taxes and whatever, and then they give a $500 million check to the Metropolitan Museum, and that's meant to expunge everything that goes before it.
Yeah.
And actually... the mechanisms are the same. Yeah, you're meant to expunge all the death and so on, because actually the check goes to Black Lives Matter. That's absurd. That goes completely contra the film.
Would it surprise you to hear that the film was originally supposed to be for Oliver Stone to direct, and then he dropped out, and Spike Lee came in, and then the film was given the African American perspective? I mean, it feels... That to me was not a surprise when I read that. It's something that feels very Oliver Stoney about returning to Vietnam and about the action kind of elements, I suppose, to it. That maybe...
Well, I mean, so this is the dilemma of the film, in the sense that what I definitely want to see is more black films, more films with black protagonists dealing with, particular types of experiences in America that are not given a showing generally in American cinema. I mean, I want all of that, but actually I also think I want it better than what we're given in this film.
Yeah, fair enough. Was it boring to you? That's kind of my final thing. It's 2.5 hours long. Did you get bored?
Yes.
Okay.
So we were we were meant to meet to talk at 10, and we ended up meeting at 12, and it was partly my fault. Right, because, I woke up a bit later than I expected to, and then I had some phone calls and the usual thing. But I also did find myself pausing, making some coffee, pausing, having a bath. Yeah, and I think it was just too predictable. Yeah. Right, so kind of, I mean, some plot mechanisms, you just knew what was going to happen. I mean, we talked about the landmine, we talked about the gold, the thing about the having the daughter there, the eventual reconciliation with the son. I mean... I saw all of that coming, really. Like, it was so predictable. So, I mean, part of it for me was you play games about that kind of thing. Will this happen? I bet you this will happen. It happens, right? Some of the other things were actually, I suppose, more mean-spirited because the film is full of quotations and references to films like Apocalypse Now, and you think, oh my god, I wish this film had the beautiful images that Apocalypse Now did, right? Or so I did find it long, and I felt that I had to endure it a bit. But that might just be actually, Netflix. I mean, I do wonder if, had I been enveloped by the images and watched it in a proper cinema, whether I would have felt the same way. I mean, it is true that usually when I watch things on Netflix, there is a lot of pausing going on. It's probably a lack in my character, but...
No, I'm a rewinder. You see, you're a pauser and you go off and make a cup of tea. I'm a rewinder. So the reason that a film that's 2 hours long will take me 3.5 hours to watch is because I see something I like and then I skip back 10 seconds to see it again. So
that's really good. I wish I were more like that.
that's what I do. So like I don't experience, as again, you can't do that in the cinema and you let it go. But then when I watch them off my media, that's what I do all the time. So if I think I'm going to watch something that's 2 hours long, I know it's going to take me a lot longer than that to get through.
Well, you see, I'm a rewatcher. So, i.e., after I do all the pausing and so on, if I really like the film, I will go back to it, right? And actually, what often happens, even in Netflix, is the more that I get into a film, sometimes after watching it 3 or 4 times, or then it almost goes without pausing. You're paying attention then to particular things, right? But it's almost like you have to be sold on the value of the film in relation to the value of your time, right? And actually, sadly, one of the things I can say almost with certainty is that I will not be watching this one again willingly.
No, I think
which is always a bit of a test, for films, really. So, I mean, I've been watching a lot of Youssef Chahine films, and I've been very angry at certain British critics who are entirely dismissive of this work. And I was thinking, part of the job of a critic is to enable audiences to find an in into, difficult and strange films, that are worthwhile. So, I don't want to be that person who says, don't watch this film, right? I mean, I'm always for people seeing things. But I do think, watch it guardedly. I think it's a film that's been highly overpraised. And, I certainly hope that if you do watch it, you get more out of it than I did.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, well, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you.
Cheerio.